Everybody loves a good zero to hero story, but given how often they appear in video games, it can get pretty boring and predictable. Fortunately, there are some games that like to mix things up a bit. Your character might appear to be the hero of the hour, but secretly it turns out that that's not the case at all. Cue plot twist, mind blown, I did not see that coming. Because I'm Sai for WhatCulture.com, and here are 10 video games where you're secretly the villain. Number 10, Fury. Fury is a short but ruthless shoot-em-up in which you play as a mysterious convict trying to escape from a highly advanced futuristic prison. The game starts off with you being endlessly tortured by one of the prison's 10 jailers, so it's easy to assume that you're the victim here. However, behind every prisoner is a crime that they got imprisoned for. As you venture deeper into the prison and kill more of your jailers, you start to notice that not every single one of your enemies is as ruthless as the first. Although they all want to subdue you, they don't act out of malice. One fights you just because he thinks you're a danger to his child, while another even lets you have a chance to go back before you force them to fight. So what's all this about? Well, once you manage to escape, it turns out your character is a scout sent by alien invaders in order to look for a planet worthy of destruction. Yep, the entire time you were breaking out of prison just to doom billions of people to death. Maybe next time they'll know not to torture you. Not that there'll be a next time. Number 9, Wasteland 3. One of the recurring themes of the post-apocalyptic RPG Wasteland 3 is that you can't have everything. Whether you're doing a side quest or following the main storyline, the game is likely to put you in front of a decision where picking one side over the other will come with dire consequences. This is exactly what happens in the game's ending and why it's so hard to come out of Wasteland 3 thinking your characters were unequivocally the good guys. Long story short, in the finale, the player has several options to choose from. They can side with the Patriarch, the tyrannical ruler of Colorado Springs, in order to obtain the supplies necessary for keeping Arizona Rangers alive. They can liberate the Springs by killing the Patriarch and letting the people rule themselves, or they can kill the Patriarch and replace him as the leader. No matter which option you pick though, you screw over someone somewhere in a pretty major way. If you side with the Patriarch, the people remain enslaved. If you liberate them but then leave with supplies for the Rangers, the lack of leadership and resources leads to a bloody civil war. And if you decide to liberate and then rule, you doom your fellow Rangers in Arizona to certain death. You might have someone's best interests in mind, but at the end of the day, your team is the ultimate villain in somebody else's story. Number 8, Donkey Kong. The original arcade version of Donkey Kong is a pretty simple game. Unless you count a sprite of an ape as exposition, there's really not much to go on in terms of plot and storyline. It's just the tale, we presume, of a mustachioed man trying to save his girlfriend from a dumb and angry ape. Or is it? But according to the game's description, as well as the story of its sequels, Mario is actually not the hero everybody believes him to be. It turns out he and Donkey Kong have a history beyond the latter kidnapping Pauline. In reality, the gorilla is actually a runaway pet of Mario, who's not just a jumping man, but also a cruel circus owner, who keeps animals in tiny cages and whips them into obedience. The only reason Donkey Kong kidnaps Pauline is to take revenge on his ex-owner, and if you think Mario is kind enough to just try saving his lover, you have another thing coming. For you see, in the sequel to Donkey Kong Jr., it's revealed that Mario cages the big ape after rescuing Pauline and forces him back into the circus. Apparently there's some serious evil hiding beneath that bushy moustache. Number 7, The Last of Us Part 2. The story of The Last of Us Part 2 relies on one specific lie in order to tell itself properly. The player's belief that Ellie is right to seek revenge for Joel's death. The sequel story has been the subject of many controversies and criticisms within the gaming community, but truth be told, this kind of visceral reaction is exactly what the writers intended. In the game, you get to see Ellie go from a sweet, if somewhat mischievous character into a frenzied murder machine that will stop at nothing to get her revenge. And because both Ellie and Joel are the beloved protagonists of the original game, it's easy to sympathise with Ellie and even cheer her on as she goes on her brutal crusade in Joel's honour. However, no matter what your feelings are, Ellie's actions throughout Part 2 are truly despicable. Everywhere she goes, she leaves a trail of bloody corpses, she threatens to kill children, and she even shoots a pregnant woman. Worst of all, most of the time her actions don't even have anything to do with avenging Joel. You might connect with her on an emotional level, but Ellie really is just a monster ruining people's lives. Number 6, Far Cry 4. One thing that's true about the Far Cry franchise is that the game's endings rarely leave on a good note. Most stories in the series end with the main character either achieving the opposite of what they wanted or becoming the villain that they fought. A similar thing happens with the protagonist of Far Cry 4, Ajay Ghale. Ajay joins a group of rebels in Karat known as the Golden Path to take down their homeland's dictator Pagan Min. Min is a violent and sadistic person, but the Golden Path's leaders, Amita and Sabal, aren't really any better. You see, these two are rivals and when their conflict with Pagan is reaching its bloody end, they both pressure Ajay to get rid of the other path leader, creating a catastrophic divide in the organisation. When Pagan dies, the surviving leader almost immediately turned into another dictator to deal with their rival sympathisers, commencing mass executions and creating another internal conflict that perpetuates Kyrat's devastating cycle of violence. Compare this with the secret ending where Ajay never joins the path and Pagan hands off his kingdom to him peacefully, and you realise that you're clearly supporting the wrong side by trying to be the hero. Number 5, Planescape Torment. As you would expect from a good role-playing game, Planescape Torment allows your amnesiac character, the Nameless One, to make his own decisions and shape his own destiny. This said, the past is really hard to erase, and while you might be trying to make the Nameless One gravitate towards good, you still can't deny that he's secretly responsible for the most evil things that you encounter within the game. The Nameless One is an immortal being that keeps reincarnating as different people with no recollection of his past lives. Some of these incarnations can be good, but some commit crimes so heinous that just remembering them causes the Nameless One to go insane. Other evil incarnations also include a warlock who devoured people's souls to prolong his unnatural existence, and a paranoid maniac who would kill people with elaborate booby traps. Even the good incarnation who tried to defeat the main villain did so with questionable tactics like manipulating his lover and leaving her to die, or intoxicating his companion to make him sign a soul-binding contract. Yeah, the Nameless One clearly has some issues, but maybe that's what happens when the universe itself refuses to let you die. Number 4, Fallout 4. The world of Fallout 4 offers a handful of factions for the main character to join. They each have their own agendas, some of which are more questionable than others, but this being said, none of them are inherently evil. Don't worry though, because no matter which side you pick, you're still going to be responsible for the most disastrous and heinous crime in the Commonwealth since the Great War. Every faction in the game is trying to defeat the Institute, a collective of secretive scientists that act as the boogeyman of the Wasteland. In the final mission, each faction tries to destroy the Institute's secret underground base, and each does it in the exact same way. Now, what would be the most efficient way to destroy an underground bunker? Flood it with water perhaps? Rig it with explosives maybe? Well, of course not. The sole survivor and gang would rather overload its nuclear reactor and set off a Chernobyl-sized disaster that's bound to turn the already irradiated Commonwealth into an even bigger wasteland. At this point, joining the Institute feels more moral, and even then, your character is still too much of an asshole to free all synths, even after getting appointed as director. Number 3, Middleearth Shadow of War. The protagonists of the Middle-earth series, Talion and Celebrimbor, aren't exactly hiding that they're more anti than hero. Their main tactics for fighting against their common foe are dominating orcs and callously sending them to die. But they're just orcs, right? And seeing as they are just as likely to suffer the same fate under Sauron's rule, you could say that fighting fire with fire is morally justifiable so long as it gets rid of the other fire. This isn't what happens, however. Though their objective is to take down Sauron, replicating the Dark Lord's power inevitably makes them just as bad as him. Celebrimbor, and to an extent Talion's desire for power, only ends up corrupting them. Just like Sauron, they enslave and abuse their subjects, and when Celebrimbor creates the ring that's supposed to help him destroy Sauron, its power warps his mind, making him more power-hungry and destructive. The culmination of their descent into villainy is the moment when Celebrimbor reveals he'd rather replace Sauron on his throne than just kill him, and then betrays Talion, turning him into a Nazgul. You live by the sword and you get turned into the sword? Something like that. Number 2, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Seeing as Skyrim allows you to make different choices, it might seem pointless to try and judge the morality of the game's protagonist, Dragonborn. I mean, most Skyrim players are too busy placing buckets over merchants' heads to worry about things like morality anyway. However, since each Elder Scrolls game follows some kind of canonical continuity, as is the case with the events of Oblivion's Shivering Isles DLC carrying over to Skyrim, there is a canonical depiction of what the Dragonborn ought to be, and let's just say it isn't pretty. Although they are certainly the hero who saves the world from Alduin, the dark truth about the Dragonborn is that they, well, are born with a dragon's soul, which in the Elder Scrolls universe is inherently corrupted by an insatiable lust for power and ludicrous levels of arrogance. In the game, this is manifested by the fact that most questlines have the Dragonborn assume the position of power, which implies that just like their predecessors, the Dragonborn has a deep and undeniable urge to conquer and dominate. Not to mention they really like to foos rodar random citizens on the street. Or was that just you. And number 1, Shadow of the Colossus. The story of Shadow of the Colossus is the perfect example of how experiencing the plot from the protagonist's perspective can completely change the way you judge it. In the game, you play as a young man named Wander who seeks to resurrect his dead lover Mono. This is achieved by collecting the life essence of the Colossi, whom are guardians for an enigmatic supernatural being. Given that Wander is acting out of love and how terrifying and ominous the guardians look, it's easy to assume that Wander killing them is a good thing, perhaps cleansing the lands of their ebb. However, the more guardians you kill, the more you realise your enigmatic companion says some pretty questionable things. And then the ending finally hits you right where it hurts. Once you defeat all 16 guardians, the entity, Dormin, resurrects Wander's lover, but in exchange it possesses his body and then transforms it into a ginormous demon. It then goes on a rampage, killing the human who came to stop Wander's ritual. It turns out the whole time Wander was not a noble knight, but a lunatic who'd unleashed an ancient evil onto the land just to bring his lover back. I suppose this is what Lady Gaga meant about bad romance. Speaking of video game villains, why not check out this video on screen now for 10 video game villain plot holes that everyone missed. Make sure you like this video, leave a comment down below on more games where it turns out you're the baddie. Don't forget to head over to WhatCulture.com for more content every day. I've been Sai for WhatCulture, and have a good week.